Chapter 361. Winter Break 1. Arthur, Luna said as she materialized next to me in her chibi form, her diminutive figure floating gently above my pillow. We were alone in my room, the Academy's enhanced security barriers humming faintly in the walls around us. After the Cardinal's attack, there had been a flurry of activity, urgent questions from Eva, concerned glances from Magnus, and Matthias's clinical assessment of the threat. Eventually, they had allowed me to return to my quarters to rest, though I suspected multiple surveillance spells had been activated the moment my door closed. I patted Luna's head absently, my fingers brushing through her ethereal silver hair. This time, although her golden eyes glinted with mild annoyance, she didn't swat my hand away, a testament to how concerned she must be. "Thanks," I muttered, my vision blurring slightly as exhaustion and emotional turmoil competed for dominance. How could Emma be here? The question repeated itself in an endless loop, each iteration more desperate than the last. Emma, my Emma, from a world without mana, without gifts, without cardinals or cults. Emma, who had died in my arms after a senseless accident, her final words lost beneath the wail of approaching sirens. Emma, whose absence had left a void in my heart that even reincarnation into this world couldn't fill. Did it mean she had somehow traversed the boundary between worlds as I had, becoming the Pope of the Red Chalice cult just as I had become Arthur Nightingale? Or had her memories, her essence somehow been given to the Pope, creating a hybrid being with Emma's knowledge but the cult leader's ambitions? Or worse, was she imprisoned within the Pope's consciousness? A prisoner watching helplessly as her captor used intimate details from our shared past to torment me? My mind scrambled frantically between theories, each more disturbing than the last. The room seemed to constrict around me, the walls pulsing in rhythm with my accelerating heartbeat. I had to understand this. I had to make sense of the impossible. "Arthur," Luna said, her usually imperious tones softened with something approaching compassion. "Don't think about it. Don't think about it?" I echoed with a hollow laugh that sounded foreign even to my own ears. "Emma is everything to me. I don't." "Arthur Nightingale," Luna yelled, her tiny form suddenly expanding to fill my field of vision. She darted forward, her spectral hand tapping my forehead with surprising solidity. The contact didn't hurt, but the gesture, so uncharacteristically physical for Luna, shocked me into silence. I said, "Don't think about it." Luna continued, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "What the hell are you going to do about it with how weak you are? This is one of the 5 cults, Arthur, an organization with power equal to an entire continent. Do you think you can do anything when you can't even touch resonance yet?" I stared at Luna, who hovered before me with her tiny arms crossed, her golden eyes blazing with a mix of concern and frustration as she glared at me. Of course, she was right. Painfully, undeniably right. What could I do at my current level? Challenge the Pope of the Red Chalice? Demand answers about Emma? I wouldn't last 5 seconds. I would simply die, achieving nothing but a brief, futile gesture that would be forgotten before my body grew cold. In the end, all my foreknowledge, all my intelligence, all my careful planning meant nothing against the raw reality of power in this world. I was still far, desperately, achingly far from being able to take on a cult. And, is Emma the only one who matters? Luna scoffed, her expression softening slightly despite her harsh words. Need I remind you of the 4 girls who gave you a grip on this life? Who pulled you back from the edge of despair when you first arrived in this world, lost and broken? I blinked, genuinely startled by Luna's words. Images flashed through my mind. Rachel's gentle healing when I'd first been injured. Cecilia's fierce defense of me against her own royal guards. Rose's quiet wisdom guiding me through my darkest moments. Seraphina's unwavering support, even when it went against her own interests. Then, I exhaled slowly, the sound seeming to release something tightly coiled within me. I raised my hand and delivered a sharp slap to my own cheek, the sting clearing my mind like a sudden gust of wind dispersing fog. "Arthur," Luna said, concern now openly bleeding into her voice, her golden eyes widening at my unexpected action. "Sorry," I said, managing a small but genuine smile as I met her gaze. "You're right, Luna. I can't afford to obsess over this yet. I'm far too weak." I straightened my shoulders, taking another deep breath. If Emma is truly involved with the Red Chalice cult, whether willingly or unwillingly, I can't help her as I am now. I need to grow stronger, much stronger. Luna nodded, the tension in her miniature form visibly easing. "Good. For a moment, I thought you were going to do something catastrophically stupid." "Oh, I'm still probably going to do something stupid," I admitted with a wry half-smile. "Just not catastrophically so. Not yet, anyway." Luna rolled her eyes, but I caught the hint of relief in her expression. "Progress, I suppose." I leaned back against the headboard, my mind still racing but now with purpose rather than panic. Emma's apparent presence in this world changed everything, recontextualized every assumption I'd made since my reincarnation. But Luna was right. I couldn't act on this revelation until I had the strength to survive the consequences. The final class of the first semester ended with Professor Nero's trademark efficiency. A concise summary of the semester's key concepts followed by practical applications for the upcoming break. "Arthur." I looked up to find myself surrounded. The four girls had converged on my desk with such coordinated precision that I wondered if they'd planned this ambush in advance. Knowing them, they probably had. Rachel stood closest, her sapphire eyes bright with barely contained excitement. Her golden hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail today, her serious business look as I'd come to recognize it. Cecilia leaned casually against the desk to my right, her crimson gaze assessing me with characteristic intensity. Serafina maintained a more dignified distance on my left, her silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the high windows. Rose completed the circle, standing directly across from me, her auburn hair framing a gentle smile that somehow made me more nervous than Cecilia's predatory grin. "We have a question," Rachel announced without preamble. "Just one," I replied, raising an eyebrow. "That's unusually restrained for the four of you." Cecilia rolled her eyes. "Don't be difficult. We're interested in your plans for the break." I carefully packed my tablet into my bag, buying time. The four of them watching me with such focused attention was unnerving, to say the least. "The Magnus has arranged for special training sessions," I said finally, deciding that honesty was the simplest approach. "I'll be working with him for most of the break." Rachel said, "We want to know about the time before your training begins. The Magnus doesn't expect you immediately, does he?" I blinked, suddenly understanding their interest. "Ah, no, he doesn't. I have over a week before I need to report to him." "And," Cecilia prompted, leaning closer, "what are your plans for those 3 days?" "I'm going home," I said simply. "Back to Avalon City." Something flickered across their faces, a synchronized reaction so brief I almost missed it. Then, as one, they smiled and straightened. "I see," Serafina said, her usual cool demeanor returning. "That sounds appropriate." "Quite fitting," Rose agreed with a nod. "Absolutely necessary," Rachel added, her smile widening. "Couldn't have planned it better myself," Cecilia concluded with a sudden grin that made me distinctly uneasy. Before I could question their strange responses, they began to disperse with the same coordinated efficiency with which they had arrived. "Enjoy your break, Arthur," Rose called over her shoulder. "And remember that traditional gifts are always appreciated when visiting one's homeland," Serafina remarked cryptically. "See you soon, Arthur," Cecilia said with a wink before following the others. I sat there, momentarily dumbfounded by the bizarre exchange, until a familiar giggle echoed in my mind. Chapter 362. Winter Break 2. "Mother, Father, Arya," I prayed silently, hands clasped as if it might spare me. "Forgive your unfilial son for whatever chaos I'm dragging home with me. May I find a way to repent someday." Why was I offering up apologies? Because, as fate would have it, I was trapped in a self-driving luxury car with not one, not two, not three, but 4 high-born ladies. These weren't just any nobility. 3 princesses and the daughter of Marquis Springshaper were casually seated around me as if this were a normal school trip rather than what it actually was. A calculated invasion of my private life. The true mystery was how Cecilia had managed to convince her father so easily. I'd have expected more resistance to an impromptu holiday visit involving not just herself, but 2 other princesses and a marquis's daughter. Instead, Emperor Quinn had simply nodded, muttered something along the lines of, "Take the necessary precautions." And here we were. I could feel the ache forming at my temples. Yes, I liked these girls, but did I also enjoy the quiet simplicity of life outside the spotlight? Yes, very much. Cecilia caught me in my silent turmoil and flashed a smile that was far too innocent, and I saw Rachel and Serafina exchange knowing looks. Rose sat quietly by the window, her serene expression betraying just a hint of amusement at my predicament. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just a visit. This was a full royal invasion. And here I was, the unwitting tour guide to an entourage that could rival a diplomatic mission. Rachel sighed from her seat across from me, still visibly disgruntled at not claiming the coveted spot beside me, while Cecilia and Serafina had made themselves right at home. Rose seemed content with her window seat, though her occasional glances my way suggested she wasn't entirely disinterested in the silent competition unfolding. "I wonder if your sister missed me," Cecilia murmured, leaning in with a smirk as her breath brushed my ear. "Last time I visited, she wouldn't stop asking me about court fashion." At her words, Serafina seized the opportunity to take my other hand, fingers lacing through mine with a quiet but unyielding resolve. Rachel shot a wounded look my way, clearly feeling left out of the royal tug-of-war. My mother's parting words from when Cecilia and Rachel had visited us before the summer drifted back to me. "Just try not to make things difficult, all right? Mother," I thought, "things are about to be very difficult. Not 1, not 2, but 3 princesses and a marquis's daughter under the same roof, for a week no less." I didn't know how their parents had agreed to this arrangement, particularly Alastair, who was almost fanatical in his protectiveness over Rachel. But here we were, barreling forward to an inevitable showdown in my family's penthouse. It was official. My peaceful winter break had been thoroughly hijacked. Well, so much for a quiet holiday, I thought, as Serafina and Cecilia each claimed an arm like it was a prized relic. My attempts to wriggle free had proven futile. My arms had somehow become the battlefield in their quiet tug-of-war. The car finally rolled to a stop in front of the gleaming high-rise where my family's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors. The building's glass and chrome exterior reflected the winter sky, its modern architecture a testament to my parents' substantial success in the corporate world. "So this is where the great Arthur Nightingale grew up?" Cecilia teased, gazing up at the tower. Rachel nudged me, her pout morphing into a smirk. "Think your family will be ready for all this?" Again, I swallowed, thinking of my unsuspecting parents and my sister Arya, who had developed a complicated mix of awe and suspicion toward my academy connections after meeting Rachel and Cecilia. Ready was a stretch. "Right, let's get going," Serafina announced, releasing my arm and stepping out through the butterfly door with a graceful efficiency that only a princess could pull off. Cecilia followed, gliding out as if she'd done it 1,000 times, which, knowing her, she probably had. Rose emerged next, her movements less showy but no less elegant. "Your home looks lovely, Arthur," she said with a gentle smile that somehow calmed my nerves slightly. I stepped out after them, preparing myself for the inevitable moment when my family would see the full entourage I'd brought home. We took the private elevator directly to the penthouse level, the girls chatting among themselves about their expectations for the visit. "I hope your parents made those amazing pastries again," Rachel said, her eyes lighting up at the memory. "The ones with the caramelized sugar on top. I'm more interested in seeing Arthur's childhood photos," Cecilia added with a mischievous grin. We hadn't even made it out of the elevator before the penthouse doors swung open. My mother, father, and sister Arya were already waiting, their faces a complex mix of emotions. "Welcome back, Arthur," my mother began, her voice warm, until her gaze settled on the quartet of nobility standing beside me. Her smile flickered only slightly. She'd had some practice with this situation after all. Her eyes settled on me, brimming with silent questions. I cleared my throat, trying to sound casual. "These are the friends I mentioned," I said, attempting a laugh that, in hindsight, might have sounded more like a small animal caught in a trap. Arya raised an eyebrow that was positively loaded with skepticism, her gaze lingering particularly on Serafina and Rose, the two she hadn't met before. She did see Serafina before, but to say she met her would be a stretch. At 15, just a year younger than me, my sister had inherited all of our mother's sharp perception and none of her diplomatic restraint. "For friends," my father repeated slowly, giving me a look that said we'd be having a very serious chat later. "How unexpected." "Hello, Sir Douglas Nightingale." Rachel greeted my father with a warm smile, her tone effortlessly gentle. "It's wonderful to see you again. And Lady Alice, you look as elegant as ever." My mother nodded graciously, having already weathered 2 royal visits. "Princess Rachel, always a pleasure. And Princess Cecilia." A slight tightening around her eyes was the only indication of her remembering some previous incident. "Welcome back to our home." Cecilia had the decency to look slightly abashed, though it didn't last long. "Thank you for having us, Lady Alice. I promise, no demonstrations this time." Arya snorted, not bothering to hide her skepticism. "That's what you said last time, right before you decided to show us what happens when magic meets modern technology." Before Cecilia could respond, I quickly stepped in to introduce the others. "And this is Princess Serafina of the Mount Hua sect and Lady Rose Springshaper, daughter of Marquis Springshaper." My parents immediately bowed in greeting, though my father's posture suggested he was fighting a sudden tension headache. "It is an honor to welcome you to our home, Your Highness, my lady," he said, his tone carefully modulated. But Serafina quickly raised her hand, waving off the formality with a subtle gesture. "Please, I came here as Arthur's friend, not as a princess," she insisted. "No honorifics needed." Rose nodded in agreement. "Just Rose, please," she added with a gentle smile that seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. My father hesitated, clearly struggling to decide if it was possible to just ignore the titles they wore like fine cloaks, and my mother looked at me as if to ask, "Did you plan any of this?" "All right, Serafina Rose," my father finally said, a bit awkwardly, as if trying the names out in a sentence for the first time. Just as my parents were starting to wrap their minds around the whole situation, Arya stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "So," she began, her tone casual but her eyes sharp, "all 4 of you just happened to decide to visit my brother during break? At the same time? What an incredible coincidence." I was starting to feel the last shreds of my peaceful winter break slip away. The kind of quiet, restful holiday where I'd train a bit, catch up on sleep, maybe even indulge in a good book. But that vision, gone, evaporating into thin air like morning mist in the wake of a hurricane named Cecilia, with supporting storms Rachel, Serafina, and even the usually calm Rose. As we moved into the penthouse, Arya fell into step beside me, leaning close to whisper, "You're so dead, big brother. I can't wait to see how this plays out." And from the gleam in her eyes, I knew she meant every word. Chapter 363, Winter Break, 3. Suspiciously, all 4 girls claimed exhaustion almost simultaneously after the grand tour of the penthouse. "I'm absolutely drained from the journey," Cecilia announced with a dramatic sigh that didn't quite match her energetic demeanor. "The altitude change is quite taxing," Serafina added, despite the fact that we'd been at roughly the same elevation at Mythos Academy. Rachel nodded earnestly. "Travel fatigue is a genuine physiological response." Even Rose, usually the most honest of the 4, murmured something about needing to rest before dinner. Their synchronized desire for rest raised every red flag in my mental arsenal. These were the same girls who could train for 6 hours straight or dance through royal galas until dawn without showing a hint of fatigue. Yet a 3-hour car ride had supposedly exhausted them. Unfortunately, their tactical retreat presented a logistical challenge. Although my family's penthouse was spacious by any reasonable standard, spanning 2 floors with panoramic views of the city, it wasn't designed to accommodate a royal entourage. With 5 bedrooms total, the master suite, my room, Aria's room, and 2 guest rooms, the math was simple and unforgiving. "We'll need to share rooms," I pointed out, expecting at least token resistance from young women accustomed to private suites larger than most apartments. "Well, all right," Cecilia sighed with suspicious acceptance. "A small price to pay." The 3 other girls nodded in agreement as if sharing accommodations was the most natural thing in the world. A reaction so out of character that I nearly checked for mind control spells. Princesses and nobility, who normally required private quarters with specific amenities, were suddenly amenable to roommates. "So how do we divide?" Serafina asked, her ice-blue eyes calculating something I couldn't quite decipher. "I think Rachel should be with Cecilia," Rose suggested, her tone gentle but with an undercurrent of strategic purpose that wasn't lost on me. Rachel's head snapped up, sapphire eyes widening in genuine alarm. "What? No. I don't deserve this punishment." "Don't be like this, Ray," Cecilia cooed, using the nickname that never failed to make Rachel wince. "We'll have so much fun." Her crimson eyes gleamed with mischief as she seized Rachel's wrist and physically began tugging her toward one of the guest rooms. Rachel shot me a pleading look over her shoulder that would have melted stone. I pretended not to notice. Choosing between Cecilia and Rachel in any capacity was a losing proposition. "Come along, Rose," Serafina said with uncharacteristic cheerfulness. "I'm sure we'll find our accommodations quite adequate." The 4 girls waved goodbye as Aria, barely containing her amusement, led them to their respective rooms. Her expression as she passed me communicated clearly. This is better than any reality show. Left suddenly alone, I made my way to the kitchen where my parents were preparing dinner. The familiar scent of my mother's signature roast and my father's experimental sauce wafted through the air. Normalcy that felt increasingly precious given the 4 potential diplomatic incidents currently settling into our guest rooms. "So," I said, sliding onto one of the kitchen island stools, "you've met my 4 friends now." My mother looked up from the vegetables she was arranging, a proud smile illuminating her face. "Yes, and what lovely friends you've made at Mythos, Arthur. 2 princesses last time, and now 4 distinguished young ladies all at once." "Alice?" my father interjected, his brow furrowed as he stirred his sauce with more vigor than necessary. "This is a bit more of an issue than you're acknowledging." My mother shot him a pointed look that I recognized all too well, the silent communication of a couple who'd been together long enough to have entire arguments without a word. "Come now, Douglas," she replied, setting down her knife. "At this rate, won't we have many adorable grandchildren to spoil? Think of the possibilities." I choked on the water I just sipped, coughing violently as my mother patted my back with maternal efficiency. "I mean, look how lovely they all are," she continued as if she hadn't just casually suggested I was cultivating a harem rather than friendships. "Each with such striking features. What unique combinations they could create." "Mother?" I managed weakly, once I could breathe again. "Just imagine," she persisted, eyes gleaming with a disturbing matchmaking fervor. "Little ones with crimson, sapphire, ice blue, or warm brown eyes, with black, auburn, golden, or silver hair. The genetic diversity alone is fascinating." My father shot me a sympathetic glance. "Alice, perhaps we shouldn't speculate about our son's future family planning over dinner prep." "Oh, I'm just thinking ahead," my mother replied with a casual wave that belied the calculating gleam in her eyes. "It's not every day your son brings home 4 exceptional young women who clearly adore him." "They have security details, don't they?" Arya asked as she slid into her chair, eyes bright with mischief. I noticed the unmarked cars down the street. "Yes, though not in the penthouse itself," I confirmed with a sigh. "Their status requires certain precautions." My father's expression grew more serious. "I understand you all grew close when you were in that coma, Arthur, but this situation seems—" He trailed off, clearly searching for a diplomatic word. "Complicated," I offered. Entertaining, Arya corrected with a grin. Do you have any idea how popular you've become? Every girl at Slatemark Academy asks me about you. I could set you up with dozens of admirers if you're interested. Absolutely not, I replied firmly. Yes, I suppose your schedule is quite full with the current four. Arya giggled, clearly relishing my discomfort. You could handle more, Luna commented in my mind, her spectral voice tinged with amusement. I ignored her, focusing instead on my water glass with sudden intensity. Let's change the subject, my father suggested, mercifully steering the conversation away from my complicated love life, or lack thereof, depending on how one viewed the situation. What are your plans for the remainder of winter break, Arthur? I straightened slightly, grateful for the redirect. After this week, I'll begin specialized training under the Marshal King. Then I'm scheduled to formally receive the Medal for Merit from the Slatemark Empire and the Star of Valor from the Western Continent for my contributions. My words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Contributions hardly captured the reality of what had transpired. The bloodshed, the difficult choices, the lives lost and saved. But those weren't topics for the dinner table. 2 of the highest civilian military honors at 16, Arya said, her teasing tone temporarily replaced with something like genuine respect. It's unprecedented. Father, didn't you say the last person to receive both was General Hawthorne, and that was after 3 decades of service? My father nodded, his expression a complex mixture of pride and concern. Your trajectory is rather extraordinary, Arthur. Though I must admit, your mother and I worry about the attention it brings. These honors typically come with significant public ceremonies. Well, I have to get used to it for the future, I said with a small smile. Once the dishes were done and my parents retired to their study, I went to my room. I pushed open my bedroom door, already mentally prepared to sleep, and froze in the doorway. My bedroom, my private sanctuary, had been invaded. Cecilia lounged on my bed, propped against my pillows in a crimson silk nightgown that would have given the academy prefects a collective heart attack. Rachel sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed in a more modest but equally striking sapphire nightdress, sorting through what appeared to be my childhood photo albums. Serafina stood by my bookshelf, examining my collection in a silver-gray nightgown that shimmered with her slightest movement. And Rose, sweet, supposedly sensible Rose, sat at my desk chair in a delicate rose-gold nightdress, apparently reading my journal. For pairs of eyes turned to me as the door swung fully open. Arthur, Cecilia purred, patting the spot beside her on the bed. We've been waiting for you. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that sounded suspiciously like my fate being sealed. Chapter 364. Winter Break, 4. Rachel tilted her head, her sapphire eyes wide and guileless. We wanted to chat, obviously. It's just cozier here. I raised an eyebrow. So sneaking into my room makes it cozier? Rachel nodded with complete sincerity. Precisely. Meanwhile, Serafina leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a faint smile on her lips. Besides, we're hardly doing anything inappropriate. We're just talking. Rose looked up from my journal, her expression sheepish but unapologetic. Your writing is quite insightful, Arthur. I hope you don't mind that I took a peek. Not helping any of you? I muttered, running a hand through my hair, hoping my exasperation didn't show too much. Cecilia shrugged. Look, if it's really a problem, we'll go. Her words might have sounded reasonable, but the glint in her crimson eyes suggested she'd planned this encounter down to the last-minute detail. The 4 of them gave me identically guilty yet entirely shameless expressions, and I sighed. All right, fine, you can stay, but let's not make a habit of it. People will start talking. Rachel and Cecilia exchanged satisfied glances, while Serafina simply nodded, as though we'd just come to a monumental agreement. Rose quietly closed my journal and placed it back on the desk, though I noticed she marked her place with a small bookmark. Just so you know, I added, I'm under no illusions that this isn't going to come up at breakfast tomorrow. Cecilia's smirk was unrepentant. Then we'd better enjoy it now, shouldn't we? I shook my head, quietly wondering how I was ever going to make it through this winter break. Cecilia edged closer, her hand resting on my sleeve. "Come now, Art," she teased, her voice lilting. "No need to play the shy gentleman." At this point, I wasn't sure which was worse, the reputation of being a playboy or the alternative. Still, I shot back, "You might want to reconsider that after last time." The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and instantly, I knew I'd made a mistake. Rachel, Serafina, and Rose all turned, eyebrows raised, each one intrigued in a way that was anything but casual. "Last time," Serafina repeated, tucking a strand of silver hair behind her ear, her sharp gaze firmly fixed on me. I felt Cecilia's smirk widen beside me, and I sighed. "Oh, just a misunderstanding." I could feel Rachel's sapphire eyes studying me, a glint of amusement and challenge in them. "A misunderstanding?" Serafina repeated, folding her arms. "Care to elaborate?" Before I could formulate a proper response, Cecilia leaned in with a smile that was anything but innocent. "Let's just say someone got a little more than she bargained for." I shot her a look, silently pleading for mercy, but she merely laughed. "Wait, what?" Rachel's eyes darted between us, clearly baffled, while Cecilia only smiled enigmatically. Rose looked equally curious, her head tilted like a bird observing something peculiar. I sighed, sinking onto the bed. An Alaskan king, big enough for 5. That's when I realized it wasn't just large, it was massive, with plenty of room. Even for noble homes, this was excessive. I glanced at Cecilia, who raised an eyebrow as if to say, "Handy, isn't it?" The others saw their chance. They shifted closer, and before I knew it, I'd been pulled sideways by Serafina, right into her lap. Caught off guard, I tumbled forward, and she didn't hesitate, gently settling my head against her. Her hands were soft, fingers weaving through my hair. The elven flush of her skin stood out, a slight, uncharacteristic blush. She was normally so stoic. The contrast only made her look more delicate. "I can't lie, this is actually pretty comfortable," I mused, a reluctant smile tugging at my lips as I sank into her lap pillow. After a long day, I hadn't realized how tired I was until now. Serafina's touch was careful and calm, her pale hands moving through my hair with gentle grace. I could feel her eyes on me, focused yet serene, and had to stifle a chuckle at her concentration. She paused, noticing, and tilted her head. "Is this all right?" "Yes, thank you, Sarah," I replied, meeting her gaze with a smile. She nodded, resuming the quiet rhythm, her touch calming in a way I hadn't anticipated. For once, the others were silent. Even Cecilia and Rachel seemed taken aback, glancing at me as if they hadn't quite expected this. Rose moved to sit on the floor beside Serafina, her warm brown eyes watching me with quiet concern. "Not fair, Sarah," Rachel grumbled, pressing her fingers against my cheek. "Your face is completely free of any baby fat." I gave her a raised brow. "Of course. Yours, though." I reached up and gently pinched her cheek. "Still has some, doesn't it?" She flushed as my thumb lingered, and meanwhile, I noticed Cecilia's gaze had drifted a bit lower. I followed her gaze, and then it hit me. My nightshirt was far more transparent in this light. Rachel and Serafina must have noticed as well, their cheeks reddening as they tried to avert their eyes. Rose, ever the dignified one, simply looked away, though the tips of her ears had turned distinctly pink. "Well then," I coughed, feigning composure. "Remind me to invest in heavier fabric next time." "No need," Cecilia replied, her face lightly flushed. Raising an eyebrow, I reached out to pinch her nose, which earned a rare look of surprise from her. "See? Even you have your cute moments," I grinned. She batted my hand away, but I caught the hint of amusement in her eyes, reluctantly betraying her cool exterior. Serafina chuckled softly, her fingers tracing a light pattern over my hair. "It seems even the fearsome princess isn't immune to Arthur's charms." "Don't flatter yourself, Arthur." Cecilia rolled her eyes, doing her best to remain stoic. It's just unexpected. I leaned back, enjoying the moment. Unexpected is just a polite way of saying I surprised you, isn't it? Rachel groaned. Why do I feel like I'm watching a performance? Because that's exactly what this is. I winked. A one-night special of Arthur and Friends. Not friends, Serafina murmured, her eyes gleaming as she reached over and gently pinched my nose. Right, not quite friends. I laughed, rubbing my nose. Apparently, my vocabulary needs an upgrade. Rachel folded her arms, her look of mock indignation barely holding back her smile. Given the scene here, I'd say so. Friendships don't usually involve lap pillows and affectionate pinches. Cecilia leaned in, eyes bright with challenge. I'd say we're well beyond just friends, Arthur. Or are we merely close acquaintances now? I chuckled, shaking my head. If we're redefining friendship, I'd say we're in exclusive company. Serafina smiled, her hand resting softly on my shoulder. Exclusive company, I could live with that. As the playful banter subsided, I noticed Rose's expression shift to something more serious. Her intuition had always been sharp. Arthur, she said quietly, you've seemed different since the festival. More distant. It's not just about the tournament loss or the aspect wall, is it? The room grew still. I hadn't expected this direct approach, especially not from Rose. I hesitated, unsure how to proceed. How could I possibly explain Emma to them? How could I tell them that I had memories of another life, another world entirely? That this world had once been nothing more than words on a page to me? Serafina's fingers paused in my hair. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but we've all noticed. Even during the car ride, Rachel added, her usual playfulness replaced with genuine concern. You were smiling, but it didn't reach your eyes. Cecilia, for once, didn't tease. We know something happened, Arthur. Something beyond what you've told anyone. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of their gazes. Have you ever felt like you've known someone before? In a way that shouldn't be possible. Rose's eyes widened slightly. You mean like déjà vu? More than that, I said carefully. Like meeting someone who couldn't possibly exist in your world, and yet, there they are. The four exchanged glances, clearly trying to understand. Is this about someone you met recently? Serafina asked, her tone cautious. I closed my eyes, seeing Emma's face in my mind, not as she had been in my previous life, but as she must be now, the Pope of the Red Chalice cult. It's complicated. Someone I thought I knew completely. Turns out I didn't know them at all. A betrayal? Cecilia's voice had an edge to it, protective and fierce. Not exactly, I said. More like discovering a completely different side to someone. A side that changes everything. Rachel reached out, her hand finding mine. Arthur, whoever this person is, whatever they've done, it doesn't change who you are. Or what you mean to us, Rose added softly. Serafina nodded, her fingers resuming their gentle movement through my hair. Some mysteries can't be solved immediately. Give yourself time. And meanwhile, Cecilia said, her usual confidence returning, you have us, your exclusive company. Remember? I felt something loosen in my chest. Not a solution to the Emma dilemma, but the comfort of knowing I wasn't facing it entirely alone. Thank you, I said simply, looking at each of them in turn. For being here. Where else would we be? Rachel asked with a small smile. As her words settled, I felt a warmth spread through the room. Despite the teasing, despite the not-so-subtle jabs, it felt right, and for once, the room felt full. Exclusive company it is, then? I murmured, feeling, perhaps for the first time, that this winter break might not be so daunting after all. Chapter 365. Winter Break 5. Golden sunlight filtered gently through the curtains, pulling me from the depths of sleep. As my eyes adjusted, the faint warmth on my face gave way to an undeniable realization. I was surrounded by 4 high-born ladies, sound asleep around me. Heaven or hell? I wondered, glancing at their peaceful faces. They looked so serene. The usual spark of competition softened into pure calm. For once, they weren't teasing, prodding, or plotting. Just sleeping, and it was impossible not to feel a flutter in my chest at the sight. Rachel's golden head rested against my right shoulder, her hand curled delicately over my chest. Cecilia had claimed my left side, her crimson nightgown a stark contrast against the white sheets. Serafina had somehow ended up using my legs as her pillow, her silver hair cascading across the duvet like moonlight. Rose had taken the more modest position of curling up near my feet, though her auburn hair splayed across my ankle in a gentle touch. Last night was something else, I thought with a smirk. Hours of talking and teasing, of Sarah's quiet comfort, Rachel's quips, Cecilia's playful provocations, and Rose's thoughtful insights. These characters I'd once admired from afar, separated by pages or pixels, were now flesh and blood, their laughter echoing in my ears long after we'd called it a night. It had been over a year since I'd arrived in this world, but sometimes the sheer surrealness of it all still hit me. How lucky am I mused, for extraordinary women, beautiful, talented, and somehow, in a twist of fate, genuinely fond of me. There were worse ways to start a morning, though I wasn't entirely sure how I'd explain it if anyone walked in right now. Right on cue, the door swung open, and in walked my mother. Arthur Nightingale, it's already noon, and you still haven't. Her voice trailed off and her eyes, which matched my own shade of deep azure, widened as they swept over the room, landing squarely on the 4 sleeping ladies in my bed. For a heartbeat, silence hung thick in the air. Before I could even muster a word in my defense, she cleared her throat, turned with remarkable composure, and quietly exited the room. I let out a long, suffering sigh. Did I really just set up a flag for myself? And as if the morning couldn't possibly get any more chaotic, the 4 began to stir. Serafina stretched first, blinking sleepily, while Rachel mumbled something incoherent and burrowed further into the blankets. Rose sat up with graceful promptness, immediately smoothing her hair with practiced composure. Cecilia, naturally, woke with a mischievous smirk that only deepened as she noticed my expression. "What's wrong, Arthur?" she asked, still half-lounging, looking entirely too pleased with the situation. "Oh, nothing. Except my mother just walked in on us." Serafina sat up straight, her face instantly turning the shade of a sunset. Rachel bolted upright next to her, and Rose's eyes widened in genuine alarm. Cecilia only laughed, absolutely unfazed. "Well," Cecilia said, patting my shoulder as though consoling me, "at least your family gatherings will be interesting." I groaned, burying my face in my hands. This winter break was shaping up to be a test of endurance, patience, and my family's collective blood pressure. Rachel twirled a strand of golden hair around her finger, cheeks as red as freshly picked apples. "Well, I mean, we are at that age after all," she muttered, looking everywhere except at me. "That's hardly the point," Rose interjected, her normally calm voice slightly higher than usual. "We've compromised Arthur's standing with his family." Cecilia, never one to miss an opportunity, poked at my midsection, a teasing grin plastered across her face. "Oh, please, don't tell me you wore this sheer excuse for a nightgown without any funny ideas. Genius art." I gave her a look arching an eyebrow. Funny ideas? Really? But Cecilia's focus had gone back to prodding my abs, her grin faltering slightly as she continued her curious poking. She stammered, her face growing redder with every jab. I chuckled, enjoying the rare sight of Cecilia flustered. Finally, she snapped out of it, glared at me, and hugged my face in what seemed a half-hearted attempt to smother her embarrassment with 2 soft pillows. Hey, Cecilia," I laughed, gently prying her loose as I tried to breathe. Cecilia finally let go, stepping back with a self-satisfied grin. "There, now we're even, Arthur," she announced, folding her arms with an air of triumph. Serafina, who'd been observing the entire scene with an amused, slightly long-suffering expression, let out a soft sigh. The two of you really are incorrigible. Unfair, Cecilia, Rachel grumbled, promptly pulling me over to her side with a determined pout. Thankfully, I'd learned my lesson from the earlier debacle and managed to avoid toppling over this time, keeping my balance as Rachel drew closer. She met my gaze, a glimmer of challenge in her eyes, and then pointed, not so subtly, below her chin. You know, in certain areas I have my own advantages. I felt heat rise to my face and decided it was definitely time for a strategic retreat. With a quick, light burst of mana, I eased out of the bed and put some much-needed distance between us. Right then, I said, doing my best to sound composed, I suggest we all get ready. It wouldn't do to keep my family waiting, ladies. Rose, who had remained relatively quiet during this exchange, stood gracefully. Arthur is right. We should return to our rooms and prepare for the day. Her calm voice seemed to bring a sense of order to the chaos, though I noticed the slight blush still coloring her cheeks. As I headed to the bathroom to gather myself, I could just barely make out Cecilia's soft laugh, Seraphina's amused exhale, Rachel's muttered complaint, and Rose's gentle admonishment. After a thoroughly refreshing shower, I changed into fresh clothes and stepped out, grateful to find that the four had retreated to their own rooms to get ready. The air felt a bit lighter without the, let's call it, the friendly territorial disputes. For the sake of my sanity, I pushed thought of the morning's events aside and headed downstairs for lunch. When I entered the dining room, I found the four already seated with my parents and Arya. I paused. How on earth had they managed to get ready before me? I glanced at them, and Cecilia shot me a sly grin. Took you quite a while to make yourself presentable, didn't it, Art? She teased. Quality takes time, I shot back with a grin, sliding into the only available seat between Rachel and Seraphina, while Cecilia and Rose exchanged a glance across the table. As I caught my parents' eyes, however, they all seemed to look pointedly away, as though examining the wallpaper had suddenly become riveting. Arya, on the other hand, didn't bother hiding her amusement. A knowing smirk plastered across her face. What exactly did I miss before I got here? I thought, eyeing the four ladies and my family members with mounting suspicion. So, how's everyone's morning been? I ventured, hoping for a clue. Arya cleared her throat, clearly struggling to suppress a grin. Oh, enlightening, big brother. Absolutely enlightening. Mother may have mentioned a rather interesting scene she witnessed earlier, my sister continued, her eyes dancing with mischief. Something about a bed full of nobility? I sighed, trying to feign nonchalance, before glancing over at Rachel, only to catch myself gawking. She tilted her head, eyebrows raised as I continued to, examine her. Not that I could exactly explain my staring. Focus on the core, I reminded myself. Rachel's mana core had developed remarkably, almost startlingly so. At this rate, she'll complete the second stage of integration in a couple of months, I thought. Just in time for the field trip. From there, reaching integration rank by mid-year was no stretch of the imagination. Considering she'd only hit white rank 4 months ago, progressing to integration in under 8 months was phenomenal. Lucifer took over a year to break through white rank's strange barriers. Its properties defied easy explanation. Then again, Rachel was slightly older, her body more naturally aligned with the breaking down of her mana core, which made her transition easier. It had taken me around 8 months too, though that included the month I'd spent in a coma. Art, you're staring a bit too much, Rachel murmured, bringing me crashing back to reality. Her soft tone couldn't hide the smirk she barely suppressed as she held my gaze. I cleared my throat, suddenly aware I'd been staring a bit too long, and perhaps not entirely at her core. Just considering training ideas, I muttered, quickly turning back to my food, all too aware of the bemused glances from around the table. Training ideas? Is that what they're calling it these days? Arya quipped, earning herself a warning look from our father. Fine. Focus, I thought. I decided to check everyone else's cores while I was at it. Seraphina, Rose, and Cecilia were also at white rank and would progress through the integration process now. So, are we all settled in? my father asked casually, with the air of someone who'd seen enough peculiar dining companions to know when to let things slide. Serafina looked up with a polite nod, and Cecilia, with a playful smirk, replied, "More than settled." I caught Arya hiding a chuckle behind her napkin as I sighed. Just the beginning of winter break, and I already felt like I'd earned a promotion in patience. "Arthur?" Rose said quietly from across the table, her warm brown eyes meeting mine. "I hope we haven't caused too much disruption to your family's routine." Before I could assure her it was fine, Arya jumped in. "Oh, no disruption at all. In fact, this is the most entertaining winter break we've had in years. Usually Arthur just locks himself in his room with books and training equipment." "Arya," I warned, but she merely grinned, unrepentant. "What? I'm just making conversation with your exclusive company." I nearly choked on my water. Had they told her about that conversation? Looking around at the 6 women at the table, my mother, my sister, and the 4 who had somehow claimed space in my life, I realized this winter break was going to be unlike any other. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Chapter 366. Winter Break 6. Wow. To think the great Arthur Nightingale is making time for his cute sister. How absolutely noble of you, Arya declared with exaggerated reverence, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I shot her a withering glare that only made her grin wider. She was lounging comfortably in the self-driving car, looking every bit the modern teenager in her light denim jacket layered over a crisp white t-shirt and artfully ripped jeans. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, a few strands framing her face, deliberately casual in that way that actually took significant effort. "You're the one who practically begged for this outing," I reminded her, adjusting the sleeve of my own short-sleeved navy shirt. I'd paired it with dark jeans that, I now realized with mild horror, matched my sister's almost exactly. "We're matching," Arya pointed out gleefully, noticing at the same time. "How adorable. I should take a photo for your fan club." "I don't have a fan club," I said flatly, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. The events at Mythos Academy had garnered more attention than I'd anticipated. "Keep telling yourself that," she replied, tapping away at her phone. "I get at least 3 DMs a day from girls asking about you. Is your brother seeing anyone? Does he like brunettes? Can you get me his contact?" She mimicked each question with increasing dramatic flair. "And what do you tell them?" I asked, one eyebrow raised. Arya's grin turned positively feline. "That you're unavailable. Very, very unavailable." "Is that so?" I smirked. "And what gave you that impression?" "Oh, I don't know," she said with exaggerated innocence. "Maybe the 4 beautiful ladies who arrived at our home and immediately made themselves comfortable in your personal space? The way Cecilia looks ready to incinerate anyone who stands too close to you? The territorial dance they perform whenever another woman enters your orbit." The car glided smoothly through the city streets, its navigation system occasionally announcing upcoming turns in a pleasant voice. Outside, Avalon's familiar architecture slid past, the mix of modern high-rises and restored historical buildings that gave our city its distinctive charm. "Speaking of which," Arya continued, her tone shifting to something more genuine, "I know you're taking time off, but aren't you usually obsessing over training schedules and mana manipulation techniques by now?" I watched the city pass by through the window. The aspect wall is blocking my progression to resonance. Until I find a way past it, pushing harder won't accomplish much. Sometimes patience is the better strategy. "Spoken like someone who's already 3rd ranked at Mythos," she muttered, a hint of something vulnerable breaking through her teasing facade. I turned to look at her properly. "How was your first semester at Slatemark? You never really told me." Arya suddenly became fascinated with a loose thread on her jacket. "It was fine." "Fine," I prompted. "I ranked 95th, she admitted quietly. "Out of 100. The number hung between us for a moment. Unlike me, Arya had never shown exceptional talent in combat or mana manipulation. While I had been blessed with remarkable affinity across multiple elements, she struggled with even basic techniques. That's 5 spots higher than failing out completely, she continued with forced lightness. So, progress. I felt a protective surge rise within me. The ranking system is flawed. It prioritizes combat potential over other skills. Skills like what? Being able to hack the cafeteria menu to get extra dessert. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. Like strategic thinking, creative problem solving, technical innovation. I leaned forward, catching her gaze. Not everyone needs to be a combat specialist. The world needs different kinds of talent. She blinked, seemingly surprised by my vehemence. When did you get so wise, big brother? I've always been wise. You've just been too busy being annoying to notice, I replied, deliberately lightening the tone. She punched my arm with surprising strength for someone who ranked 95th. Jerk. Brat. We shared a smile, the kind that only siblings can. Equal parts exasperation and affection. The car announced our arrival at Avalon's renowned Riverside district, pulling up to Sakura's, a fusion restaurant that had been Aria's favorite since childhood. A comfortable silence fell as we perused our options, broken only when the server came to take our orders. Aria, predictably, chose the spicy tuna fusion roll, her standard since she was 12. I opted for the chef special. Our food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As we began eating, I found myself watching Aria. The precise way she mixed her wasabi, the childish delight she still took in good food, the determined set of her shoulders even when discussing her academic struggles. A wave of protective affection washed over me. In my past life, I'd been alone. No siblings, no real family to speak of. Having this spirited, irritating, wonderful sister was something I never knew I needed until I had it. What are you staring at? She asked, catching me watching her. Do I have something on my face? No, I said simply. I'm just glad you're my sister. Her chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth, her eyes widening in surprise. Then, predictably, she recovered with a dramatic flourish. Ugh! Don't get sentimental on me, Arthur. I'm trying to eat here. But the pleased flush on her cheeks betrayed her. Can't help it? I shrugged, stealing a piece of her roll despite her indignant squawk of protest. Comes with the big brother territory. Speaking of territory, she said, smoothly redirecting the conversation. Are the 4 of them always so intense? I mean, I thought you were exaggerating in your messages, but after seeing them up close, I allowed myself a small, confident smile. That's just their way. In their world, showing interest isn't done subtly. Subtly? Aria's eyebrows shot up. Cecilia literally wrapped herself around your arm at breakfast like it was her personal property. That's her being restrained, believe it or not. Aria nearly choked on her water. The noble ladies at Slatemark aren't anything like them. They mostly keep to themselves and occasionally bestow benevolent nods upon us commoners. Different personalities, I said, remembering the early days. Different upbringings. And you're okay with all of them being interested in you? She asked, unusually direct. I met her gaze steadily. I'm not opposed to the attention. Wow, she breathed, eyes widening. So you're actually considering all of them? I love them all, I replied calmly. That's very bold of you, Aria giggled. I love having a front seat to all this drama, though. I laughed softly. For the next hour, I found myself sharing carefully edited versions of my encounters with each of the 4 women now residing in our penthouse. Aria listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting with questions or commentary that ranged from insightful to mortifying. By the time we finished our meal and moved on to dessert, mochi ice cream for her, green tea parfait for me, Aria had somehow extracted more information about my personal life than I'd intended to share. So you're playing it cool? She asked incredulously. For powerful women are practically throwing themselves at you, and you're just weighing your options. I took a deliberate bite of my parfait. What would you have me do? The situation requires delicacy, especially with my goal. Aria rolled her eyes. Or you could just admit you enjoy having 4 beautiful women fighting over you. I didn't bother denying it. That too. She pointed her spoon at me accusingly. I may be ranked 95th, but even I can see you're playing a dangerous game, brother. The whole world is a dangerous game, I replied. I'm just playing to win. What about you? I asked gently, changing the subject. Are you happy at Slatemark? Arya's smile turned wistful. I'm getting there. It's hard being in your shadow sometimes. You know? Oh, you're Arthur Nightingale's sister? Are you as talented as he is? She mimicked the questions with only a slight edge to her voice. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. That's not fair to you. It's not your fault you're a prodigy, she shrugged. Besides, I'm carving out my own path. Even without special talents, I've got a good head for strategy. And I've made some good friends. Anyone I should be concerned about? I asked, only half joking. She laughed. Now who's being the protective one? No, not yet. Though there is this one boy in Class C who's kind of cute. I'll need a name and full background check, I said immediately, making her laugh harder. See? This is why I don't tell you things. As we finished our desserts and prepared to leave, I found myself reluctant for our time together to end. These moments of normalcy were precious. A reminder that beyond the high-stakes world of Mythos Academy, beyond the looming threats I knew were coming, there was this family, laughter, the simple joy of teasing a sibling. We should do this more often, I said as we waited for our car. What? You mean you're not going to spend the entire break locked in your room or entertaining your royal admirers? Arya asked with mock surprise. I can multitask. She smiled genuinely this time. I'd like that. As our car arrived and we climbed in, I found myself thinking about family, the one I'd never had before, and the one I was lucky enough to have now. For all the complications of this new life, for all the dangers and challenges ahead, having Arya as my sister was a gift I wouldn't trade for anything. What are you smiling about now? She asked as the car pulled away from the curb. Just thinking about how fortunate I am to have such an annoying little sister, I replied. She punched my arm again, but leaned against my shoulder a moment later. Right back at you, big brother. And in that moment, everything was perfect. Chapter 367. Winter Break, 7. After coming back from hanging out with Arya, I spent time with the four girls. My parents had retired early, and Arya was video chatting with friends in her room, leaving us with a rare moment of privacy. Honestly, I'm impressed with your dedication, Rose commented from her place at the foot of the bed, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders instead of its usual careful arrangement. She was leafing through one of my training journals, her analytical mind clearly appreciating the detailed notes. Your approach to mana circulation is quite innovative. It's the bare minimum, Cecilia countered as we lounged on the bed. And this time, I was relegated to her lap. Fairness demanded a rotation after all, since Serafina couldn't hog that privilege every night. Arthur's potential is extraordinary. He's only scratching the surface. I exhaled, resolving to be ready. Besides, who else would have the patience to listen to Rachel's endless theories on courtly etiquette? I said, feigning a sigh, which earned me a smirk from Rachel and a good-natured swat on the shoulder from Serafina. Cecilia rolled her eyes. The Martial King clearly recognizes your value. Private training sessions are unheard of. The Martial King has always valued potential over pedigree, Rose observed quietly. My father says it's why the Academy has maintained its standards despite political pressure. I chuckled. Oh great, you're all going to inflate my ego until I float away. Exactly, Rachel grinned, leaning over. Prepare for greatness, Arthur. There's no escaping it. At her words, I felt both the warmth of friendship and the weight of responsibility, as well as a renewed determination to be ready for whatever came next. For now, I'd revel in this company, and maybe survive the impending expectations with a smidgen of grace. I caught Cecilia's gaze lingering on my abdomen. Is my nightgown not quite up to your royal standards this evening, Your Highness? I teased, raising an eyebrow as her cheeks flushed and she quickly looked away. This time, I'd made sure to wear a nightgown that actually covered everything. No repeat of last night's unplanned transparency. She leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. I'd actually prefer nothing. Her fingers brushed my forehead as she spoke, and this time, it was my turn to blush. Rose cleared her throat, her face bright red. Perhaps we should discuss something more appropriate. Despite her embarrassment, there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. Before I could muster a comeback, Rachel held my hand with a small, wistful smile. When you're training with the Martial King, don't forget about us. All right? There was a softness in her voice that caught me off guard. Serafina nodded beside her, wrapping her fingers around my other hand, her expression uncharacteristically tender. Yes, don't leave us wondering, alone. Like I could ever forget, I replied, smirking as I brought both their hands up and pressed a light kiss to the back of each. With 4 of the most extraordinary women I know waiting for me, I'd be a fool not to. Rose watched with a small smile, her eyes conveying emotions far deeper than her composed demeanor suggested. You have a gift for flattery, Arthur Nightingale. Not flattery if it's true, I replied, meeting her gaze directly. Cecilia, who'd been quietly watching, leaned down from her place above me. Before I could even blink, she was holding my face in her hands, her lips brushing against mine in a bold, unexpected kiss that left me too stunned to think. When she pulled back, her crimson eyes sparkled with both mischief and warmth. That's just to make sure you remember. My heart was thudding as I tried to summon something witty, but all I managed was a smile that probably looked more dazed than dashing. Somewhere in the background, Rachel and Serafina exchanged glances before each giving Cecilia a knowing, exasperated look. Rose's eyes had widened considerably, her composed demeanor momentarily shattered. You are so unfair, Cece, Rachel huffed, crossing her arms before reaching over and, to my surprise, pulling me up with enough mana-boosted strength that I didn't have much say in the matter. Before I knew it, my face was nestled against her chest as she held me close, a faint blush spreading across her cheeks. Leaning in, she whispered, See? Far better than Cecilia, right? Her voice wavered, her confidence almost hiding a touch of nervousness as she gently patted my head. Cecilia watched with raised eyebrows, her smirk not hiding her amusement. Well, Art? It seems you've been caught in a, shall we say, tight spot. I chuckled, pulling back just enough to meet Rachel's eyes. I'd say I'm in a rather unique position. Serafina, who had been quietly observing, shook her head with an exasperated smile, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like, honestly, the 3 of you? Rose had buried her face in her hands, though I could see the tips of her ears burning crimson. This is highly improper, she mumbled, though she made no move to leave. Rachel's blush deepened, but she held on, clearly intent on proving her point. Meanwhile, I could only pray fervently that my parents wouldn't choose this moment for a late-night check-in. We eventually settled in, and the room grew quiet as everyone drifted off to sleep. Or so I thought. Just as I was about to close my eyes, a soft whisper brushed against my ear. Art. I turned, meeting Serafina's gaze, her ice-blue eyes bright even in the dim light. She had an almost petulant pout on her face that made me bite back a grin. Aren't you being a little unfair? She whispered, weaving her mana into her voice so the others wouldn't stir. What do you mean? I whispered back, arching an eyebrow, already knowing where this was headed. She tilted her head, the moonlight catching in her silver hair. You know exactly what I mean. Make it up to me, hug me, she whispered, pulling slightly on my nightgown for emphasis. I shook my head, chuckling, but slid an arm around her shoulders. Happy now? Her eyes sparkled with a mischievous glint as she shook her head, guiding my arm lower, until my hand rested on her exposed midriff, her breath catching for just a moment. Sera, I murmured, feeling my own heart rate kick up a notch. It's only fair, she said, flashing a grin that was both innocent and entirely self-assured as she settled her hand over mine, keeping it in place. With a little sigh of satisfaction, she nestled in and closed her eyes, clearly content. From the other side of the bed came a soft, almost inaudible sigh. I turned slightly to see Rose watching us, her expression a complex mixture of longing and resignation. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, pretending to be asleep. And as I lay there, surrounded by these four remarkable women, I felt both the weight of the situation and the start of a smile. Despite the chaos of the morning, sparked by Serafina's playful move from the night before and the ensuing looks exchanged between the girls, it seemed par for the course now. Just another part of this unusual but somehow endearing reality I was living. A small, genuine smile curved my lips as I watched them, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. Because, deep down, I already did love them with everything in me, these remarkable, frustrating, and undeniably captivating women who had somehow made their way into my life. Morning would come soon enough, bringing with it the inevitable teasing and playful competition. Rose would pretend nothing had happened, maintaining her dignified facade. Cecilia would be boldly unapologetic about her kiss. Rachel would vacillate between embarrassment and determination. Serafina would wear that knowing smirk that seemed to see right through me. For now, that would do. And maybe that was already more than enough. Chapter 368. Winter Break, 8. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows, illuminating the breakfast table, where 6 of us sat in tense silence. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken competition as Rachel methodically cut her pancakes into perfect triangles. Serafina delicately sipped her tea, and Rose pretended to be engrossed in the morning news on her tablet. Cecilia, however, was practically radiating triumph. "I should be back around dinner time," she announced to no one in particular, her crimson eyes gleaming with undisguised victory. "Don't wait up if we're late." The other 3 girls maintained admirable composure, though I caught the slight tightening of Rachel's grip on her fork, the almost imperceptible narrowing of Serafina's eyes, and the way Rose's tablet screen dimmed from her unconscious mana fluctuation. "Have a lovely time," Rose said with practiced politeness that couldn't quite mask her disappointment. My mother, oblivious to the subtle power play unfolding at her breakfast table, smiled warmly. "The weather is perfect for an outing. Do you two have plans?" "Oh, a few," Cecilia replied cryptically, flashing me a look that made me grateful my parents couldn't read mana signatures. Hers was practically pulsing with anticipation. Arya, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly grinned. "I'm sure they'll find ways to entertain themselves." I shot her a warning glance, which she ignored completely. An hour later, I stood in the lobby waiting for Cecilia. When the elevator doors opened, I momentarily forgot how to breathe. She transformed from her usual refined elegance into something far more dangerous. A crimson crop top hugged her curves, revealing a tantalizing strip of midriff above a white skirt that floated around her thighs. A light white jacket hung casually from her shoulders, and at her throat glimmered a ruby pendant that matched the stones in her ears. Her golden hair fell in loose waves, framing a face that knew exactly what effect it was having. "See something you like, Art?" she teased, spinning slowly to give me the full effect. I refused to be flustered. "Several things, actually," I replied, deliberately taking my time as I looked her over. "You clean up nicely, Princess." A faint blush colored her cheeks, a small victory that I savored as I offered her my arm. "Shall we?" Her fingers wrapped around my bicep with possessive pressure. "Lead the way." We stepped out into the crisp winter morning, the sun bright but offering little warmth. I'd arranged for a private car rather than using the family vehicle. Some conversations weren't meant for smart home systems that my sister could potentially hack. "So," I asked once we were settled in the back seat, "how exactly did you win this particular lottery?" Cecilia's smile was pure satisfaction. "Rock, paper, scissors." I blinked. "Seriously?" "Best of 7, she nodded, looking far too pleased with herself. "Rachel threw paper 3 times in a row. Rookie mistake." "And they agreed to this because?" "Because I suggested the alternative was 4 separate dates, which would eat into your training time with the Martial King," she explained, shifting closer until our thighs pressed together. "This way, you only lose 1 day." How considerate of you, I said dryly. I'm nothing if not practical, she replied, completely unrepentant. Besides, they each get their turn later. I just get to set the bar impossibly high. The car glided through Avalon's upscale shopping district, finally stopping before a building so exclusive it didn't even have signage. Just a discreet golden door and a uniformed attendant who straightened immediately upon seeing Cecilia. Your Highness, he bowed deeply. We're honored by your presence. Cecilia acknowledged him with a regal nod, her royal upbringing impossible to disguise despite her casual attire. Thank you, Gerard. Is everything prepared? Just as you requested. I raised an eyebrow at her as we were escorted inside. Should I be concerned? Definitely, she murmured, her eyes dancing with mischief. The interior revealed a private atelier, a custom clothing designer whose work was typically reserved for royalty and the ultra-elite. Racks of fabric in every imaginable texture and color lined the walls, while artisans worked quietly at various stations. You're getting me clothes? I asked, genuinely surprised. Cecilia reached up to straighten my collar, her touch lingering. I'm investing in my future. The Marshal King's training is brutal on wardrobes, and you'll need something suitably impressive for the ceremonies next month. I have clothes, I protested weakly. You have acceptable clothes, she corrected. But if you're going to be seen with me publicly, you need exceptional ones. For the next hour, I stood patiently as fabrics were draped, measurements were taken, and Cecilia vetoed or approved various designs with imperial authority. It was oddly intimate, her eyes following every line of my body as tailors worked, her fingers occasionally brushing against me as she assessed materials. Having fun? I asked as she dismissed a particular shade of blue with a decisive flick of her wrist. Immensely, she admitted, circling me with critical appraisal. You have no idea how satisfying it is to finally dress you properly. I feel like a doll. Her eyes gleamed. My doll. The possessiveness in her voice should have annoyed me. Instead, I found it strangely appealing. When the head designer stepped away to consult with his team, I caught her wrist, pulling her close. If I'm yours, I murmured, letting my voice drop to a register that made her pupils dilate. Then you're mine. That's how this works. For once, Cecilia seemed at a loss for words, her usual confidence momentarily shaken by my directness. I released her slowly, enjoying the way her breath had quickened. Just so we're clear. She recovered quickly, a slow smile spreading across her face. Crystal. After finalizing the orders, which I suspected would cost more than most people's yearly income, we continued our day at an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The maitre d' escorted us to a private alcove with panoramic views, the kind of table that was perpetually reserved for royalty. Do you always get this treatment? I asked as champagne appeared without being ordered. Cecilia shrugged, the casual gesture at odds with her regal bearing. I'm the princess of the Slate Mark Empire. This is actually them being restrained. I took a sip of the champagne. It was excellent, of course. Does it ever get tiresome? Always being watched, always being Princess Cecilia instead of just Cecilia. Something vulnerable flickered across her face before she masked it. Sometimes, she admitted. That's part of why I like being with you. You see me, not just the title. Hard not to see you, I said softly. You're rather impossible to ignore. Her smile turned genuine. Careful art. That almost sounded like a compliment. Take it however you want, I replied, though we both knew exactly what I meant. After a quick lunch, Cecilia led me through a series of high-end boutiques, insisting on selecting accessories to complement my new wardrobe. I drew the line at letting her pay for everything, which resulted in a spirited negotiation that ended with us splitting the considerable bill. You're infuriatingly stubborn, she complained as we left the final shop. It's part of my charm, I replied, taking her hand in mine with deliberate confidence. She looked down at our intertwined fingers with surprise that quickly melted into satisfaction. At least you're learning. The afternoon sun was beginning to wane as we strolled through West Hollow's Central Park, our purchases sent ahead to the penthouse. The winter air had grown colder, giving Cecilia the perfect excuse to press herself against my side. "Cold?" I asked, knowing full well she could regulate her body temperature with minimal effort. Mages rarely suffered from the cold. "Freezing," she lied shamelessly, burrowing closer. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her in. "Better." "Much," she sighed, her arms sliding around my waist with proprietary satisfaction. We found a secluded spot overlooking the park's frozen lake, where skaters traced patterns across the ice below. In the fading light, with the city beginning to illuminate around us, Cecilia looked up at me with unusual seriousness. "When do you think we'll take the final step?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I didn't pretend to misunderstand. The question hung between us, fraught with implications both personal and political. A princess's virtue was theoretically a matter of state concern, though modern sensibilities had relaxed many of the ancient taboos. "When we're both 18, I answered honestly, not because of tradition or expectations, but because there should be no question that we both know exactly what we want. She studied my face, searching for something. And what if I already know what I want? I brushed a strand of golden hair from her face, letting my fingers trail along her jawline. Then you'll have the patience to wait until we can have it properly. No sneaking around, no secrets, no regrets. Instead of the protest I expected, she smiled. A genuine, unguarded expression that transformed her features from beautiful to breathtaking. I knew there was a reason I liked you, Arthur Nightingale. Only liked, I teased, pulling her closer. Her eyes darkened as she rose on her tiptoes. I think you know it's considerably more than that. I closed the distance between us, capturing her lips in a kiss that started gentle but quickly became something else entirely. Her arms wound around my neck as she pressed herself against me, the winter chill forgotten as her natural heat enveloped us both. When we finally broke apart, her eyes were slightly unfocused, her breath coming in small puffs of white in the cold air. "Well," she said, trying to regain her composure, "that was just the beginning." I finished for her, my voice rougher than I'd intended. Her smile turned predatory. "Promise." The walk back to the car was considerably more hurried than our earlier stroll, Cecilia practically vibrating with triumphant energy beside me. As we settled into the back seat, she curled against me like a satisfied cat. "The others are going to be unbearable after this," I observed, stroking her hair absently. "Let them," she murmured against my shoulder. "I won this round fair and square." "And the next round?" She looked up, crimson eyes gleaming with challenge and affection in equal measure. "That's for them to win, if they can." As the car wound its way back toward the penthouse, I reflected on the day's unexpected revelations. Beneath Cecilia's imperial confidence and flirtatious exterior was a depth and vulnerability I hadn't fully appreciated before. She wore her possessiveness openly, yes, but her attachment went far beyond mere conquest or competition. And if I was being honest with myself, I felt the same. The evening sky had darkened completely by the time we arrived home, the penthouse windows glowing with warm light against the city backdrop. Cecilia straightened her clothes and ran a hand through her slightly disheveled hair. "Ready to face the Inquisition?" I asked, knowing the others would be watching for every tell, every hint of what had transpired between us. Cecilia's smile was pure, unrepentant satisfaction. "Absolutely. Let them look all they want. You're still wearing my lipstick on your collar." I glanced down and sure enough, there was a distinctive crimson smudge on my shirt. "You did that on purpose." "Of course I did," she admitted cheerfully. "I play to win, Arthur." As we stepped into the elevator, I pulled her against me one last time before we would be under scrutiny again. "So do I, princess," I murmured against her ear. "So do I." The shiver that ran through her was all the victory I needed. Chapter 369. Winter Break, 9. Finally, I was able to get a handle on our illustrious guildmaster, Callie declared, arms crossed as she fixed me with a withering glare. Her black eyes narrowed dangerously, reminding me why most guild members approached her with caution. "Oh, great and powerful guildmaster. Were you truly so consumed with important matters that Ouroboros completely slipped your mind?" The sarcasm dripping from her voice could have filled buckets. I leaned back in my chair, pretending her appearance in my study space was entirely expected. "Of course not, Callie," I replied smoothly, assessing her appearance with mild surprise. Gone was the formal attire she typically wore for guild business, replaced with fitted jeans and a loose black sweater that gave her a softer appearance. Though I have to ask, why the casual outfit? Important date later. She shifted her weight, momentarily thrown off her rhythm. "Why? Is it weird?" "Not at all," I said, allowing a genuine smile. "You look cute. The whole, approachable human look works for you." Callie's expression darkened, though I caught the faintest hint of color on her cheeks. "Don't try to flatter your way out of this, Nightingale. Your charm might work on your noble admirers, but I'm immune." "Wouldn't dream of it," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Anyway, what exactly requires my immediate attention?" I was under the impression Ouroboros would be handling routine operations during the break. "The guildmaster," she emphasized with pointed precision, "needs to take care of certain matters personally." She produced a tablet from her bag and set it before me with a decisive click. "Starting with this backlog of paperwork that requires your authorization." I raised an eyebrow at her commanding tone. "That is hardly the appropriate way to address your superior, Vice Guildmaster Callie." Her only response was to look pointedly away, the ghost of a smirk playing at her lips. "Besides," I continued, picking up the tablet with casual confidence, "Elias has already processed most of this, correct? It shouldn't be too substantial." I glanced up to find Callie watching me with the satisfied expression of a predator who's successfully lured prey into a trap. "Not substantial?" she echoed, tilting her head with feigned innocence. "Oh, poor Arthur. This is what we in the business world call karmic retribution. You've spent months dumping work on me and Elias under the pretense of needing to study." "I did need to study," I interjected, feeling a prickle of unease at her evident satisfaction. "I am also a mythos student," she countered swiftly, "and a year your senior, I might add. But that's beside the point." Her smile widened fractionally. "This is simply you reaping what you've sown. That isn't just a little paperwork you're holding. That's 3 months of accumulated guild decisions requiring guildmaster approval." My eyes narrowed as I began scrolling through the document queue on the tablet. The farther I scrolled, the wider my eyes grew. "What the hell, Callie?" I looked up at her in disbelief. "Why didn't you alert me before it reached this magnitude?" "Because you were always too busy, you insufferable genius," Callie retorted, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. "Every time I tried to schedule a meeting, you had training or exams or some crisis with your princesses. So now you get to enjoy the fruits of your neglect. Have fun." She turned to leave, adding over her shoulder, "Oh, and Reika requested to see you." "What for?" I asked, still scrolling through the seemingly endless list of documents requiring my attention. "Nothing urgent," Callie replied, pausing at the door. She simply wished to see her savior again. Her words, not mine. I noticed her gradual retreat and quickly looked up. "And where exactly do you think you're going?" "Home," she stated matter-of-factly. "Before me?" I asked, watching her pause at the threshold. Her back stiffened slightly. "I've put in my hours for today." "I don't think so," I said, allowing a slow smile to spread across my face. "Come back and work with your guildmaster, my vice guildmaster." "You were absolutely about to say slave," she cut in, turning to face me with dangerous calm. "I will personally ensure you never see the end of this paperwork if you try that again." "I wasn't," I protested, maintaining an expression of perfect innocence. "You absolutely were. You can't prove it." Her eyes narrowed to slits as we engaged in a silent battle of wills. Finally, she sighed dramatically and stalked back to the chair across from me. "I hate you, Nightingale," she declared, dropping into the seat with surprising grace for someone so visibly annoyed. "Well, that's unfortunate," I replied, sliding half the tablet's workload to her personal device. Because we're going to be here a while. Deal with it, Vice Guildmaster. She muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a creative death threat, but I noticed the small smile she tried to hide as she began working. For all her prickly exterior, Callie was one of the few people I could count on implicitly, even if she did enjoy watching me suffer through administrative tedium a bit too much. By the way, I added casually, when we're done, you're explaining exactly how you let this paperwork reach critical mass without staging an intervention. When we're done, she countered without looking up, you're going to apologize to Elias. He's been covering for you since September. Fair enough. Ouroboros might be my guild, but these two kept it running while I played hero at Mythos. Perhaps it was time I remembered that. I stifled a yawn as I flicked to the next document, a request from the Alchemist subsection for additional funding for rare materials. Quickly scanning the details, I spotted 3 unnecessary expenditures and 1 legitimate need. With practiced efficiency, I annotated my observations, approved the essential portion, and sent it back with instructions. That's the 14th request you've processed in 10 minutes, Callie remarked, her voice somewhere between impressed and annoyed. It takes me at least twice that long for half the output. I glanced up at her. 3 hours into our paperwork marathon, she'd abandoned her perfect posture, now slouched in her chair with one leg tucked beneath her. Her hair, previously immaculate, had been hastily tied into a messy bun, with several rebellious strands framing her face. It's pattern recognition, I explained, already moving to the next file. Once you've seen enough resource allocation requests, equipment proposals, and mission reports, you start to identify recurring elements. Callie muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like a creative insult. What was that? I asked, not bothering to hide my amusement. I said you're insufferably efficient and I hate you, she replied clearly this time, stabbing her stylus against her tablet with unnecessary force. Some of us have to actually read the entire proposal instead of just, whatever it is you do. I read them, I protested mildly. I just read quickly. Inhumanly quickly, she corrected. It's unnatural. No one should be able to process information that fast. I shrugged, not bothering to explain that my previous life had involved absorbing and analyzing massive amounts of data daily. Consider it one of my many talents. Callie rolled her eyes so dramatically I worried she might strain something. If your ego gets any bigger, we'll need to reinforce the ceiling. We settled into a comfortable working rhythm, the silence broken only by the occasional tap of fingers against screens and Callie's increasingly creative cursing when she encountered particularly dense reports. The guild office's automated lighting had dimmed to evening mode, and outside the windows, West Hollow's skyline glittered against the night sky. This is ridiculous, Callie declared after I finished another batch of approvals. I'm barely at 20% of my queue, and you're already... She squinted at my progress indicator. 73% done? How is that even possible? I told you, I'm just... Efficient, yes, I know, she interrupted irritably. It's still annoying. Some people have to sleep occasionally, Nightingale. I paused, suddenly aware of the shadows under her eyes. When was the last time you took a break? And I don't mean today, I mean in general. Callie looked away, pretending to focus on her screen. I don't know what you're talking about. Callie. Fine, she conceded with a huff. Things have been busy since you've been away. Elias handles the technical aspects and field operations. I manage administration and finances. We've had an influx of new recruits after Ouroboros' publicity from the Redmond incident, plus 3 new subsection proposals that needed evaluation. I felt a twinge of guilt. While I'd been advancing at Mythos, my guild had been expanding significantly, largely due to my own actions, and I'd left the burden of managing that growth to my 2 lieutenants. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I should have been more present. Callie looked up, genuine surprise flickering across her face. Did the great Arthur Nightingale just apologize? Should I check for signs of the apocalypse? Don't get used to it, I replied dryly. But yes, I mean it. I'll be more involved going forward. Something in her expression softened slightly. Well, that's... A gentle knock at the door interrupted whatever she'd been about to say. We both turned to see the door slide open, revealing a young woman with striking violet hair that fell in gentle waves to her shoulders. Her eyes, the same unusual shade of violet, surveyed the room with quiet intensity before settling on me. "Reika," I said, rising from my chair. "I thought we weren't scheduled to meet until tomorrow." Reika Solien smiled softly, stepping into the office with the fluid grace that characterized all her movements. At 18, she was 2 years my senior, though her delicate features often led people to underestimate both her age and her capabilities. "Elias sent me in," she explained, her voice carrying the subtle musical quality I'd noticed during our first meeting. "He mentioned you were finally addressing guild matters and thought I might want to see you." The slight emphasis on finally wasn't lost on me. In other words, he thought I should get all my scoldings in one convenient evening, I observed wryly. Reika's smile widened fractionally. "I would never presume to scold the guildmaster." "She wouldn't need to," Callie interjected. "I've covered all possible reprimands thoroughly." "I'm sure you have," Reika replied, her serene demeanor a stark contrast to Callie's evident frustration. "Arthur, you were telling me she doesn't like you?" Luna said in my mind. "Look at her, if that is not a girl in love, then I don't know what is." "You don't know what is it?" I responded. Chapter 370. Winter Break, 10. Reika stood at the threshold of the guild office, her heart quickening despite her outwardly composed demeanor. Arthur sat behind the guildmaster's desk, completely absorbed in his work alongside Callie. The soft glow of the office lighting framed him against Avalon's nightscape, highlighting the determined set of his jaw as he processed document after document. So high, so untouchable. She had known about Arthur Nightingale before he saved her, of course. Even in the isolated circles she had inhabited, his name had traveled. A prodigy, a rising talent, unusually resourceful for someone so young. But those stories hadn't captured the full measure of him. How could mere words convey the unwavering determination she had witnessed firsthand, or the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him even in moments of apparent relaxation like this one? "Elias sent me in," she said, keeping her voice level despite the warmth spreading through her chest. "He mentioned you were finally addressing guild matters and thought I might want to see you." She couldn't help emphasizing finally ever so slightly. "In other words, he thought I should get all my scoldings in one convenient evening," Arthur observed with that wry smile that always made her breath catch. Reika allowed her smile to widen just a fraction, not trusting herself with more. "I would never presume to scold the guildmaster." "She wouldn't need to," Callie interjected. "I've covered all possible reprimands thoroughly." "I'm sure you have," Reika replied, admiring Callie's straightforward manner. How simple it must be, she thought, to express irritation so openly without fear of revealing deeper emotions. Standing before him now, Reika felt the familiar cascade of memories that his presence always triggered. She had been nothing but a failed experiment of the Red Chalice cult, a vessel they had tried to fill with power through methods too barbaric to contemplate. She had escaped, but the trauma had fractured her memories, leaving only fragments of her former self. She'd believed herself free until they found her again, threatening the foster family who had shown her nothing but kindness. She had been prepared to surrender herself to protect them when Arthur appeared. A boy barely 16, yet carrying himself with a determination that defied his age. "You have a choice," he had told her that day, his voice unwavering even as cult operatives closed in. "You can join Ouroboros, and I'll give you the power and resources to get your revenge. Or you can walk away, and I'll still protect you and your family. The choice is entirely yours." No one had ever offered her choices before. She had been a subject, an experiment, a weapon, never a person with agency. In that moment, standing amid the ruins of the life she'd tried to build, something vital had shifted within her. Then came Bishop Vale, the one who experimented on her before and was back to retrieve the cult's valuable asset. She had watched, stunned, as Arthur pushed himself beyond any reasonable limit, employing techniques that clearly strained his body to its breaking point, all to keep his promise to protect her. The image was burned into her memory. Arthur standing bloodied but unbowed, his mana nearly depleted, facing an enemy who should have crushed him effortlessly. Not for glory or power or some grand cause, but because he had given his word to a girl he barely knew. How could she not love him after that? "Would you like to sit?" Arthur's voice pulled her from her reverie, gesturing to the chair beside him. Reka took the offered seat, careful to maintain a respectful distance despite the longing to be closer. As Callie continued sorting through her documents, Reka gathered her courage. She had rehearsed this conversation countless times, weighing each word, anticipating his responses, preparing for rejection. "I've been considering my position within Ouroboros," she began carefully. Arthur's gaze sharpened with interest. "Are you unhappy with your current role?" "No," she said quickly. "It's not that at all. I've been—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I've been reflecting on what I truly want." Callie glanced up briefly, then tactfully focused back on her tablet, though Reka suspected she was still listening. "When you saved me from the cult," Reka continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "you offered me power for revenge. But that's not what I want anymore." She watched Arthur's expression, searching for any hint of disappointment or confusion. Finding none, she pressed on. "I want to be your sword, Arthur." The words hung in the air between them. She saw surprise flicker across his features, quickly replaced by thoughtful consideration. "My sword," he repeated, testing the phrase. "Yes." Her voice grew more confident. "Not just a member of Ouroboros, but an extension of your will. Someone you can deploy with absolute confidence for the most sensitive operations." She leaned forward slightly, her violet eyes never leaving his. "Someone dedicated to your cause above all else." What she couldn't say, what burned in her chest unspoken, was that being his sword was the closest she could allow herself to be to him. She wasn't worthy of more, not with her fractured past and uncertain future, but she could be useful. She could protect him, support his vision, fight his battles. It was a form of love she could offer without burdening him with expectations he couldn't, shouldn't, fulfill. "May I ask why?" Arthur's voice was gentle, curious rather than dismissive. Reka took a breath. "Because you saved me when you had no obligation to do so. Because you risked your life against Bishop Vale when any rational person would have retreated." She kept her tone even, professional, though her heart raced. "And because I believe in what you're trying to accomplish." She didn't add, "Because I love you in ways I have no right to express. Because serving you gives purpose to a life that was never meant to be my own. Because standing in your light is the closest thing to belonging I've ever known." Arthur studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. She resisted the urge to look away from the intensity of his gaze, forcing herself to remain still under his scrutiny. "Being my sword would mean facing danger," he said finally, "potentially confronting elements of the Red Chalice cult again. I'm aware. And it's what you truly want? Not because you feel indebted, but because it aligns with your own goals." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "It's what I want." Another moment of silence stretched between them before Arthur nodded. "Then I accept your offer, Reka." His expression softened slightly. "Though I hope you understand that a good sword must occasionally question the hand that wields it. Blind loyalty isn't what Ouroboros or I need." Relief washed through her, followed by quiet determination. "I understand. I won't hesitate to speak my mind when necessary." The tension that had been building in her shoulders eased somewhat. This was enough. This had to be enough. "Now," Arthur said, "tell me about your studies. Elias mentioned you've been excelling at the Tower of Magic." The shift to a lighter topic allowed Reka to breathe more freely. "The instructors have been supportive, despite my unusual background." She couldn't help the note of pride that crept into her voice. "My usage of my gift have advanced considerably in the past few months. It had been a grueling process, Hours spent in isolation chambers, practicing her gift. But she had persevered, driven by a determination that surprised even her. "And the transfer application?" Arthur asked. "Any news?" The question made her heart flutter unexpectedly. He had remembered. Of course he had remembered. Arthur Nightingale rarely forgot details, but the fact that he cared enough to ask sent a warm current through her chest. "I've been accepted," she said, unable to completely mask her satisfaction. "Fourth-year placement at Slatemark Academy, beginning next semester." "That's excellent news," Arthur replied, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Congratulations, Rekha. You've earned it." "Your recommendation helped," she acknowledged. "I merely opened a door. You walked through it on your own merit." His praise meant more than he could possibly know. After a lifetime of being valued only for what others had done to her, being recognized for her own achievements felt